The first thing I noticed was the light. It poured across the road in sheets, flat, white, and steady, the way floodlights look at a construction site after midnight. I saw them long before I reached the bend in the highway, for tall rigs set up along the shoulder, humming faintly like distant transformers. The beams spilled over the asphalt and into the tree line, bleaching the roadside grass the color of bone. I slowed my car. Road work at 2 in the morning wasn't unusual out here. The county liked to repair the rural highways when traffic was light. But something about the brightness felt excessive, as if they were trying to light not just the road, but the air itself. The night had been dark before that. A deep, country dark, clouds covering the moon, forest pressing close on both sides of the highway. The kind of darkness where your headlights feel small and temporary. Then the floodlights appeared ahead, humming softly, turning the road into a stage. I rolled closer. There were 6 workers. They stood in the center lane, clustered around a section of freshly cut asphalt. One of them held a long rake used to smooth hot tar. Another leaned over what looked like a measuring rod. 2 others stood beside a compact machine I didn't recognize. Their movements were slow and methodical, but quiet. Construction sites usually carried a certain kind of noise. Clanking metal, rumbling engines shouted instructions. Even late at night, there's always something mechanical grinding or whining. Here there was only the hum of the lights, and the whisper of my tires on the pavement as I coasted toward them. I eased off the gas. My headlights swept across the crew, and that's when something tugged at the back of my mind. Something small, almost invisible. It took another few seconds to understand what it was. The floodlights were blazing from 4 different angles, bright enough to bleach the road markings pale gray. But none of the workers cast shadows. I blinked. At first I thought the light was just too diffuse. Maybe the beams overlapped in a way that erased the shadows. But that didn't make sense. The cones along the shoulder cast sharp black lines behind them. My car threw a long dark shape across the road as I slowed. The men didn't. They stood directly under the lights, yet the asphalt beneath them remained evenly lit. No dark outlines, no shifting silhouettes when they moved. Just smooth, uninterrupted brightness. I slowed even more. One of the workers dragged the rake across the asphalt. The teeth scraped the surface in a long arc. But there was no sound. The rake moved. The asphalt shifted slightly beneath it, and the night stayed silent. I rolled down my window. Cold air spilled into the car, carrying the smell of fresh tar and something metallic underneath it, like wet coins. The floodlights hummed steadily. Far away, a truck passed somewhere down the highway behind me. Its sound arrived strangely late, as if the air had briefly forgotten how to carry it. The workers continued their motions. Slow, measured, perfectly synchronized. 2 of them bent at the same time, lifting something from the ground, what looked like a long strip of reflective paint tape. They stretched it across the road. Except the tape didn't glint. Reflective material should flare under lights like these. Instead it absorbed the brightness, becoming oddly dull, like a shadow pretending to be tape. I realized my car had stopped completely. The engine idled softly. None of the workers had acknowledged me. Not a glance, not a gesture. They moved around the cut section of asphalt like parts of a single machine. I watched one of them step closer to the edge of the hole. That's when I saw it. The asphalt they'd removed wasn't just a rectangular patch. It was a circle, perfectly round, about 12 feet across. Inside the circle, the road surface looked different, not rough or broken like you'd expect from excavation. It was smooth, black, and faintly reflective, like glass. The worker with the measuring rod lowered it into the center. The rod sank down, farther than it should have. I leaned forward in my seat. The hole wasn't shallow. The rod kept going. 3 feet. 4. 5. The man stopped lowering it and tilted his head slightly, as if listening. Then he nodded. Another worker wheeled the small machine forward. Up close it looked like a paint sprayer, but the tank was wrong. Too smooth, too seamless, with no seams or bolts anywhere on its surface. He squeezed the trigger. A thin line of white paint hissed out across the road. except it didn't smell like paint. The scent drifting through my window was sharp and chemical, almost like ozone after lightning. The line curved slowly around the edge of the circle. Perfect ring. I watched it spread. The paint didn't sit on top of the asphalt the way road markings usually do. It sank, absorbing into the surface like water soaking into paper. The floodlights flickered. Just once. In that momentary pulse of dimness, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The lights weren't pointing downward the way floodlights normally do. Their beams angled inward, converging, every rig aimed directly at the center of the circle, as if they were trying to illuminate something below the road. The worker with the rake stepped aside. Another man approached the edge. He knelt and slowly reached his hand into the hole. His arm went deeper than it should have, past the elbow, past the shoulder, until it vanished entirely. He didn't struggle, didn't react. He simply leaned forward slightly, as if feeling around in a dark cupboard. Then he withdrew his arm. Empty, but the expression on his face had changed. Not relief, not frustration, recognition. He turned his head. For the first time, one of them looked directly at me. His eyes reflected the floodlights like polished glass. Flat, colorless, and calm. The other 5 workers stopped moving. All at once, 6 heads turned toward my car. They watched me silently. For several seconds, no one moved. The night felt thicker somehow, like the air had become heavier around the construction zone. Then the man by the circle stood up. He wiped his hand on his vest, still looking at me, and nodded. Not a greeting, more like acknowledgement, permission. The worker with the sprayer finished the ring. The white circle closed with a soft hiss. The moment it connected, the floodlights dimmed slightly. Not turning off, just lowering their brightness the way theater lights do when a performance ends. The man stepped away from the hole. All 6 workers turned back to their tasks, ignoring me again, as if I were no longer part of the scene. A second later, something moved inside the circle. At first I thought it was just my eyes adjusting. The black surface at the bottom seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a drop. But the ripple traveled upward, not outward. The measuring rod slid slowly into the hole again. The worker lowered it carefully. It sank deeper than before, much deeper, 10 feet, 15, 20. The rod kept going. My headlights flickered. For a split second, the floodlights dimmed again. And this time I saw something beneath the road. Not clearly, just a shape. Something vast shifting in slow motion far below the asphalt. The rod stopped moving. The worker pulled it out. He studied the measurement marks, then nodded once more. Satisfied, the crew began packing their tools. No conversation, no sound, just quiet, synchronized motion. Within a minute, the sprayer was loaded back onto a truck. The measuring rod disappeared into a case. The floodlights shut off one by one. Darkness poured back over the highway. The crew climbed into 2 vehicles parked beyond the lights. Their engines started silently. Headlights came on. As the trucks rolled past my car, I noticed something strange about the tires. There was no dust on them, no tar, no sign they'd actually been working on the road. The last truck slowed beside me. The driver leaned slightly toward his window. For a moment I thought he might speak. Instead he raised one hand and pointed at the white circle on the road ahead. Then he drove away. The trucks disappeared down the highway, their lights fading into the forest. I sat there for a long time. The road was quiet again. Cold air drifted through the window. Eventually I stepped out of the car. The circle gleamed faintly under my headlights. Perfect. Smooth. I walked toward it slowly. The asphalt inside the ring felt different under my shoes. Softer, almost warm. I looked down. For a moment, the surface reflected my face. Then the reflection vanished, and I realized something that made my chest tighten. The road inside the circle had no shadows either, even though my headlights were shining directly on it. I stepped back immediately. The surface beneath the ring shivered slightly, like something breathing under a blanket. That was when I understood why they'd allowed me to see them. Why none of them had tried to stop me. The circle wasn't finished. Not yet. Road markings need traffic to set. Weight, pressure, movement across the surface. My car idled behind me, headlights pointed straight at the ring. The first vehicle scheduled to drive over it. And somewhere deep beneath the asphalt, something enormous shifted again, slowly rising toward the place where the road had been opened, waiting for the moment the line was crossed. My rearview mirror showed a storm, though the sky above me was clear. The windshield reflected a sky of stars so sharp and unbroken it seemed almost too perfect, while the mirror trembled with the heat and movement of something else entirely. Thunder rolled behind me in the reflection, though the air around the car was still, dry, and heavy with the faint scent of asphalt. I slowed the wheel, half expecting to see rain hit the hood, but the glass remained untouched, the asphalt glowing faintly in the halo of my headlights. I had been driving for hours, the highway a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through a forest too dense to see past the first rows of pines. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet where sound doesn't exist except where you force it. The thrum of the engine, the occasional whir of tires over seams in the road. In the rearview, the storm pulsed with motion, clouds boiling, lightning slicing like knives across the mirror's surface. It wasn't just a reflection. It was alive and separate. When lightning struck, the mirror glowed an instant before the sky outside did, and I realized I could hear the faint echo of thunder before it should have arrived. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I tried not to look. I told myself it was fatigue, the way long drives stretch your senses until the ordinary becomes strange. My eyes flicked back and forth between the two skies, the one above, endless and steady, and the one behind, furious and impossible. The mirror's storm moved with a speed and purpose that didn't match the road, forming clouds that twisted and stretched, chasing something I couldn't see, some invisible pulse that followed the lane's black line as if it existed in a separate dimension behind me. It began to rain in the mirror. Large drops slid down the reflective surface, streaking the storm across my vision. I blinked, and the drops seemed to cling to the glass, translucent and glimmering. But when I looked forward, the road ahead remained perfectly dry. I tapped the windshield wipers, hoping the mechanism might obscure the illusion, and yet the drops continued to trail in the mirror, their movement unaffected by my car's speed or the wiper's motion. Each flash of lightning revealed shapes I didn't want to see. Trees bending back toward the horizon in impossible angles, shadows stretching like hands reaching for me, low clouds that seemed to swallow the rear lane whole. The highway twisted slightly, an S-curve that should have been familiar, but with each glance behind me, I noticed subtle differences. The forest in the mirror leaned inward, dark trunks more numerous, branches lashing together like they were part of the storm's body. Once, I thought I saw movement among them, something darting along the tree line, but when I blinked, it was gone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling it was tracking me. Not through the air, but through that impossible reflection of rain and wind and dark light. I pulled onto a side road, a narrow shoulder lined with dirt and gravel, hoping to reset my senses. The storm in the mirror reacted immediately, condensing. Clouds rolled faster, lightning became furious, the rain hammering down in a torrent that had no parallel outside the glass. I sat in the car, the engine ticking as it cooled, listening to the echo of a storm that existed only in the reflection. I pressed my fingers to the mirror's frame. It was solid, unyielding glass. There was no water, no condensation, only the illusion it carried. I considered calling someone, anyone, but the highway was a ribbon of isolation, cell service dead somewhere just beyond the curve. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel into the black, revealing nothing but the straight, dry road ahead and the infinite storm behind. When I leaned forward, resting my forehead on the steering wheel, I thought I heard wind in the rearview, a gust of air brushing against my hair, though the car remained sealed and the night silent. I started driving again, slower, careful. The storm moved as though it had a mind of its own. Lightning struck the highway behind me, but the road ahead reflected only stars. Each time I checked the mirror, the rain in it had advanced, the clouds gathering faster than I could comprehend. I caught flashes of shapes again. A tall, thin thing rising in the distance of the storm, then falling, then rising again. Its movements were deliberate, almost curious, tracking me with an attention that made my skin crawl. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of perception, a hallucination from exhaustion. But when a bolt of lightning in the mirror illuminated the shadowy forest behind me, I noticed the trees leaned inward, not naturally, but in a way that mirrored the curve of my car's path. The reflection adapted. It learned. I could feel it watching, anticipating each motion. The rearview mirror wasn't just showing a storm. It was a portal to something else, something that moved like water but observed like a predator. A moment later, the rearview flash of lightning illuminated the interior of my car. I caught my own reflection, wide-eyed, lips pressed tight, but for a heartbeat, the storm reflected my face wrong. Elongated, distorted, my eyes too dark, my hands too long on the wheel. The mirror was lying, bending reality backward to some logic I couldn't comprehend. I pressed both hands against the wheel, my knuckles white, trying to anchor myself in the real sky above. But the stars were nothing. Above, calm. Behind, a hurricane alive. The road dipped briefly, and my headlights caught a thin shimmer in the asphalt. Something wet and black that glistened for a heartbeat before disappearing. My breath caught. The storm in the mirror pulsed in response. A deep, rolling growl of thunder that vibrated through the glass. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Something in the storm wanted me to look, to follow, to acknowledge its presence. My brain screamed to stop, to park and wait for sunrise, but curiosity and fear tethered me in place. As I drove on, I noticed the storm wasn't just moving, it was closing the distance. Despite the fact that my speed should have widened the gap between me and my rearview image, the rain seemed to race forward, striking with anticipation. Flashes of lightning revealed a texture beneath the cloud, an impossible landscape of jagged reflections and rippling darkness, something not bound by gravity, yet following the curve of the highway perfectly. The final time I glanced into the mirror, I saw the storm reach the road. Not the road I drove on, but the road in the reflection. Rain hitting asphalt that had never been wet, the dark figure from before rising fully from the treeline, its outline impossibly tall, standing where no human should, motionless yet alive. A lightning strike illuminated it briefly, and I realized it wasn't waiting for me. It was waiting in the storm, for me to notice, for me to understand. I didn't look back again. The road ahead remained dry, calm, infinite. My hands shook on the wheel, my ears straining for thunder that never came. I couldn't unsee the reflection, couldn't unhear the echoes of impossible rain, couldn't unfeel the gaze of something waiting in the storm behind me. Some part of me wondered if I would ever reach the end of the highway. Some part of me feared that the storm would catch up, not by moving through space, but by expanding, seeping forward through the glass until it was everywhere. That part of me whispered that the mirror wasn't showing a storm. It was showing the inevitability of being seen, and I was already in it.